What if I told you that the man behind Balenciaga would probably hate modern Balenciaga? Today, the brand is known for oversized hoodies, destroyed sneakers, and controversy. But the founder, Cristobal Balenciaga, was called the master of us all by Christian Dior. He didn't chase trends, he didn't give interviews, and he didn't even attend his own shows. So, how did we go from sculptural couture perfection to distressed sneakers? Let's talk about Balenciaga. Cristobal Balenciaga was born in 1895 in a small fishing village in the Basque Country in Spain. He didn't come from wealth or glamour. His father was a fisherman and his mother was a seamstress. That's obviously important for him because from a young age he was surrounded by fabric and he learned all the techniques. And so he learned how to sew by watching his mother work. There's a famous story that as a teenager he dared to tell a local aristocrat, the Marquesa of Casa Torres, who was his mother's client, that he could recreate one of his couture dresses. So she gave him the fabric and he recreated it perfectly. So she became his patron, and in 1908 he started his apprenticeship in Casa Gomez as a tailor. By his early 20s, Balenciaga had opened house coutures in San Sebastian, Madrid, and Barcelona, where he dressed the Spanish royalty and aristocracy. But then came the Spanish Civil War, and in 1937 he moved to Paris, the capital of fashion, and that's where the legend truly began. When Balenciaga opened his fashion house in Paris on Avenue George V in 1937, Europe was at the brink of war. His first collections were deeply influenced by Spanish arts and heritage. He referenced Velázquez, Goya, flamenco dresses, and the dramatic use of black lace. Even during the German occupation of Paris in the early 40s, he continued to present collections, while many houses struggled with fabric shortage and restrictions. Balenciaga adapted by focusing on cut, proportions, and construction rather than excessive decoration. And during those years, he basically built his reputation amongst Parisian elites as a designer of extraordinary discipline and technical mastery, laying the foundation for the radical silhouettes experiments he would later introduce after the war, while Christian Dior was celebrating tiny waists and hyper-femininity in the late 40s. Balenciaga was revolutionizing silhouettes by removing the waist and transforming the feminine silhouettes. In 1957, he introduced the revolutionary sack dress. Unlike Dior's cinched new look silhouettes, the sack dress removed the waist entirely. It fell straight from the shoulders, creating a loose shape. At the time, it shocked critics, but it marked a turning point in modern fashion. Balenciaga was freeing the body from structure. And around the same time, he developed the cocoon coat in the late 1950s with its rounded shoulders and curved volume that wrapped gently around the body. It created a protective sculptural silhouettes, and so it enveloped the body. Then came the balloon jacket, also in the late 1950s. This piece played with inflated volume and gathered fabric, creating dramatic shape through construction rather than decoration. And so it demonstrated his technical mastery. Finally, in 1958, he introduced the famous baby doll dress, short and voluminous, pushing even further away from traditional tailoring. He created volume that floated away from the body. Instead of shaping women into clothes, he created clothes like an architect, because Balenciaga didn't just sketch, he cut, draped, and constructed everything himself, and he truly understood fabric structurally. He also worked with textile manufacturers to invent new materials that could hold shape. In Paris, Balenciaga quickly became known as something different. Christian Dior called him the master of us all, and Coco Chanel said, he is the only true couturier, the others are simply fashion designers. So that tells you everything. Balenciaga approached clothes and fashion like sculpture, and he was also a very private person. He didn't give interviews, and he would let his work speak for itself. In 1968, at the height of his power, Balenciaga decided to close his fashion house. He didn't like the direction that fashion was taking. Ready-to-wear was rising, and fashion became faster and more commercial. And he believed that true couture that was slow and meticulous was disappearing. After Balenciaga closed his house in 1968 and passed away in 1972, Balenciaga basically disappeared from the fashion conversation for years. The brand existed legally, but it wasn't culturally dominant. The real revival happened in the late 1990s. When Nicolas Gasquier took over in 1997, he was very young, and Balenciaga was not a powerhouse brand. Instead of copying Cristobal Balenciaga's culture literally, he translated the DNA into something futuristic. His Balenciaga was architectural but also modern, with sharp structure, tailoring, and experimental fabrics. He became known for the city bag, which became the it bag of the late 2000s, but also sculptural jackets, strong shoulders, and tech-inspired silhouettes. Nicolas Gasquier respected Cristobal Balenciaga's obsession with silhouette and structure, but he applied it to the modern woman. Many critics say that he is the one who truly restored Balenciaga's prestige. After Gasquier left, Alexander Wang took over. His era was shorter and more commercial focused. His Balenciaga was clean, minimal, black and white heavy, urban, and sport influenced. He toned down on experimentation and focused more on wearable luxury. Some critics felt like the brand lost some of its intellectual edge during that time, but commercially it stabilized the house, and it was a strategic period for the brand. Then came Demna Gvasalia, and everything shifted. Demna is a designer from Georgia, a country in the Caucasus region. He was born in 1981 in what was then part of Soviet Georgia. In the early 1990s, during the Abkhazian War, his family fled as refugees. He has often talked about displacement, instability, and growing up during political conflicts. And we can see traces of that in his work with oversized protective silhouettes, military references, layering, and a sense of discomfort. Before Balenciaga, he briefly studied economics, which is something that he didn't love, and he then studied at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp, which is one of the most prestigious fashion schools in the world. He also worked at Maison Margiela and at Louis Vuitton under Marc Jacobs. In 2014, he founded Vêtements, the anti-fashion collective that exploded with oversized hoodies and DHL t-shirts. And in 2015, he became the creative director of Balenciaga. So at first glance, Cristobal and Demna seem like complete opposites, but actually they have more in common than we think, because they were both shaped by war. Both experience displacement and instability. So the difference isn't trauma, it's more generation. Cristobal lived in a world where culture represented order. After war, fashion was about restoring elegance, discipline, and control. So his response to all the chaos was precision and absolute mastery of construction. Demna grew up in post-Soviet collapse, globalization, the internet, late capitalism, and his word isn't about restoring order, it's about questioning it. So his response is different. When Cristobal used construction to bring calm, Demna uses exaggeration to expose discomfort. One perfects elegance and the other interrogates it. And that's why Balenciaga feels so different today, not because the roots are different, but because the era is. One of the biggest criticism is that Demna turned Balenciaga into parody. Luxury houses were traditionally about craftsmanship, refinement, and aspiration, but Demna introduced $1,000 distressed sneakers, the IKEA-inspired totes, and mud-covered runaway shows. And so one of the critics is this a commentary on capitalism or actually just capitalism working perfectly? Demna is often accused of using controversy as marketing, like extremely provocative runaway concepts, political staging, and most notably the 2022 ad campaign scandal involving children and inappropriate visual elements. That campaign caused a major backlash and enforced the brand to issue public apologies. Many critics argued that the brand crossed a line in its pursuit of provocation, and for some people that moment permanently damaged the brand's reputation. Another criticism is aesthetic fatigue. People argue that everything is oversized, everything is ironic, and it's just hoodies at couture prices. Some critics feel that the brand leans too heavily on meme culture and hype rather than innovation. On the other hand, others argue that Demna is actually one of the most honest designers of our time because he reflects consumerism, logo obsession, wealth disparity, and the internet absurdity. And technically, his couture collection prove that he understands construction deeply. His exaggerated proportion require complex pattern cutting and internal architecture. So the debate becomes, is Demna mocking luxury or redefining it? And now Balenciaga is entering a truly new chapter. In July 2025, legendary Italian designer Pier Paolo Piccioli, best known for his long tenure at Valentino, was named the creative director of Balenciaga, succeeding Demna, who moved to Gucci. Piccioli doesn't come from the same cultural moment as Demna and Cristobal. He's known for romantic couture, deep mastery of craftsmanship, and fluid, expressive design. Industry insiders see his appointment as a pivot for the brand, a chance to reconnect with Balenciaga's tradition of refined construction while bringing his own voice in the brand's future. In some ways, it brings the story full circle from Cristobal's architectural precision through Demna's cultural critique, and now to a designer whose work blends elegance and emotion, potentially redefining what Balenciaga means in a world where fashion is both disruptive and wearable. Let me know your thoughts and comments about this video, about the history of the brand, and about the numerous fashion designers that worked for Balenciaga as creative directors. Take care, and I'll see you next week for another video. Bye!